Hey there, Fit Thrive community. It's Coach Kelly with another awesome interview. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Zachary Long of the Barbell Physio. He's a doctor of physical therapy and a strength and conditioning coach. He works with a ton of CrossFitters and is just a plethora of information. I'm always eager to see what he's going to dish out on his Instagram because I'm constantly learning from him. Today, we're going to talk all things essential and pull-ups, and we're really going to dig into proper pull-up mechanics, some deficiencies that we see break down once you master that first pull-up and you really want to dig into the nuts and bolts of it. Zach goes over some exercises that you can do to help improve your strength so that you can master that first pull-up. And then we also talk about, hey, you know what? No big deal if you never get that pull-up, but you can still work on all these things because it transfers to overall strength. So we're going to dive right in. Such good content. I hope you really enjoy it. Zach's a really down-to-earth guy. I love listening to him talk because he makes everything so relatable regardless of where you are in your fitness journey. So without further ado, I introduce to you Dr. Zachary Long. I'm here today with Zach Long, and we are going to discuss everything and anything regarding pull-ups. We know as coaches, especially for women, like getting that first pull-up is a really essential goal. It's a definer of strength and stability and all those good things because it is really a full body exercise. And so today we're going to break down, what are the good mechanics of a pull-up? What often do we see as deficiencies in our clients? And ways to make you more proficient at doing pull-ups. Zach is like the man to go to on this. If you've ever followed his Instagram, he's got insanely good information on pull-up mechanics. And so we're just going to dive right in and see where this goes. At first, Zach, though, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your background is.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. I'm Zach Long. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I've spent the last 15 or so years working in various levels of strength and conditioning, from coaching high schoolers, coaching in college, to now kind of combining the strength and conditioning world with the physical therapy world so that people can work out and stay injury-free and perform optimally.
Awesome. So what sort of led you to this work? Was it something you were always interested in? Did something profound happen in your life where you decided you wanted to merge the world of physical therapy and strength and conditioning? Or
Well, like a lot of people that follow you, the getting fit and working out really changed who I was, gave me more confidence, just transformed me into a different person in a very, very positive way. And that, when it happens to you, you want to share that with others. And
awesome.
so I thought the strength and conditioning world was where my calling was, and I got working in that, and then realized that I needed to also help people perform pain-free. And that got me from strength and conditioning to physical therapy. And fortunately enough, I'm in a position now where I can combine those two things and help people perform better and stay healthy at the same time.
Yeah. And, I'm always sharing all your content with my girls. I see your videos on Instagram or articles that you write, and it's always very relevant to discussions that we're having that are relatable. In fact, you had a video the other day where you were doing the hip opener with the knee on the foam roller. And we do a lot of various versions of that exercise, but that kind of brought in a new element to things that we work on.
Well, you should see my physical therapy clinic, which is nonstop Kelly Davis exercises for glutes. So,
yay! Well, good. I'm glad we can kind of share those different elements. Awesome. So today we're really going to dig into the pull-up, right? It's always a goal, especially for women. You and I were having a little bit of a discussion ahead of time where it's easy to break down some of these squatting mechanics, and they're very receptive to it because, like you said, after a while, regardless of where you're at, anyone can sort of do, you can do a squat at various different levels. Not everyone's going to be doing loaded, heavy squats, but everyone can eventually squat. And especially the type of clientele that I work with, squatting is a normal part of our program, loaded squatting. People are very receptive when you pinpoint and break down their squat, and they're like, oh yeah, that's so great. Thanks for helping me. But when you start to dissect the pull-up, people get a little defensive. But I think we all get past sort of that shining moment where like, yeah, I mastered the pull-up. I can do like 100 of them. And then we sort of look at ourselves and we're like, oh, it doesn't feel right. Or, you start to feel achy and a little bit disheveled. And then you're realizing like, maybe I'm not doing this as proficiently as I should be.
Yeah.
So what are some of the basic primers that you use to help people work into their first pull-up?
Okay. Well, like we talked about off air, let's start with whether you're doing it the exact perfect way we're saying right now, or you're doing some of the faults. Like, congratulations if you're doing a single pull-up. It is a very big deal, and it is a very huge hurdle to get over. So, even as we talk about perfect technique and things like that, if you're not doing perfect technique, don't get down on yourself. Pat yourself on the back. You got your chin over the bar. That's all that really matters from the start. And you can work on refining stuff to make it a better exercise for your health with some of the stuff that we talk about. Yeah. I forgot the question.
All right, yeah, and that's true. Like getting your chin over the bar, that's a huge deal. That's a huge feat of strength, especially, for anyone, but especially for women, because, we have sort of a not really a disadvantage, but our upper body strength is a lot different than our male counterparts. So once we get to that point, there's sort of an element where we don't want to get into bad habits, because they're hard to break. So once you get your clientele into the position where they're capable of doing a pull-up or a chin-up, like what are some of the basic mechanics that you like to see to make it more proficient?
I really like when people do it from the hollow body position. So we see a lot of people that like to arch their back as they do pull-ups, and your lats, which are the main muscle group that's helping you perform the pull-ups, they also extend your back. So that's just a common fault that people will default to as they do a pull-up if they're not keeping their core really engaged and the anterior abs really turned on. But I think if people go in the hollow body position, where we think of like their entire body is positioned like a banana. So their pelvis is a little posteriorly tilted. They got a little bit of lumbar rounding, or their lumbar spine's neutral, and then pull up. It makes it a much, much better exercise for abs. And we all want stronger, better looking abs. So I think if we can do a pull up in that way, you then take the pull up from just being an upper back developer to also being an incredibly good core exercise. And if you look at some of the research out there on core activation with pull ups and chin ups, it's really, really high. It's higher than a lot of the core exercises that we do. So if we can optimize that while working on our pull-up, that's great. So we want to keep that kind of neutral spine positioning throughout the entire range of motion. That'd be the biggest thing I look for. The second thing that I'm looking for is that the shoulder girdle stays really active in the bottom position. We see a lot of people who just hang from the bar and let their shoulders just get passively pulled up, and then they initiate the pull. And it's really important to stay really active in the entire shoulder girdle throughout the full range of motion. It's going to get you stronger, but more importantly, it's going to really protect your shoulders from injuries. Your shoulder is a very, very mobile joint, and especially more often in females than males. Females have very good shoulder mobility, but it's like a golf ball sitting on a golf tee. The wind blows and the golf ball can fall off. So we don't want to continually overstretch our shoulders. And I'm not a big fan of like passively hanging out and stretching the capsule and the labrum and some of the passive soft tissue structure of the shoulder. So if we keep what we call an active shoulder, we're going to be a lot better off. So instead of just hanging and holding, I tell people to pull down on the bar. And a lot of times that's, if you're trying to work on developing your first pull-up, doing those active hangs is incredibly important. Think about going to a gym and you see somebody doing pull-ups and they're cranking out a ton of pull-ups really fast. 9 times out of 10, they're doing kind of the middle 75% of the range of motion. They never fully go down and lock out. They kind of stay where they're in this little range right here, never letting their arms get all the way extended. And why do they do that? Because that's the easiest range of motion. And when you go from a full lockout at the bottom all the way to the top, it makes it considerably harder to perform multiple reps. So the first place I'm typically going to start with somebody that needs to develop pull-up strength is with those active hangs. Hanging from a bar and just repeatedly pulling the bar down towards themselves and then relaxing, not relaxing 100%, but probably like 75% of the way down, pulling down again. And what they're doing there, if they're keeping their elbows straight, is they're getting their shoulder blades to basically depress and downwardly rotate a little bit the whole time they do that, which makes the pull-up more than just a lat strengthener. It's also going to hit some of the other muscles, smaller muscles around the shoulder girdle. And again, it's just going to protect the soft tissues, and then that's going to help them develop strength in that bottom position. And for me, being a little bit more in the CrossFit world, where the kipping pull-up is very popular, when they're having that really, really rapid descent, if they can't control that bottom position, it can be really, really rough on shoulders. And I'd say in the female CrossFit world, more than the male, I see females that can really crank out some great kipping pull-ups, except that they can't control the bottom position. And it makes me cringe sometimes when I watch, because they just bottom out really fast. And that's just an unbelievable amount of stress on the shoulder tissues.
Awesome. So I want to talk about this because we're on the subject, but then I want to go back to the hollowing as well. Because, hollowing is much easier when you're lying on the ground, and then transferring that from a pull-up position. I want to talk about that. But so for this, let's go back to that starting position. So often we describe it as a dead hang, but you're still active. So how do you relate that information? Should we not say dead hang? Should we say more of like an active hang?
I would prefer an active hang than a dead hang. A dead hang basically makes it seem very, very passive, and that you're not maintaining any tension in the muscles. Okay. But if somebody comes to me a dead hang, then I'm hopefully assuming that just means that their elbows are locked out and their shoulders are fully overhead, and that's what we typically mean. Okay. But not passive.
So you go from that active hang position, and then what's the first thing that you should feel when you initiate your pull-up?
Should feel the shoulder blades being pulled down towards your pockets. They're obviously not going to go anywhere near your pockets, but that's just typically a better cue for people than saying pull your shoulder blades down. Yeah. So if you just get them pulled down towards your pockets to initiate the pull, and then start bending the elbows and lifting your chin towards the bar.
Yeah, I always like to say to tuck your shoulder blades in your back pockets. So then we sort of get to that point, right? That's good. We start pulling up. And then we get to the point when we're reaching the top and the bar is like nearing our clavicle, and all of a sudden we're like this. So what's the best way to sort of avoid going into that shrug?
So your shoulder blades going down towards the pocket. And if you're thinking shoulder blades towards the pocket, I think the entire way down, then your shoulders aren't going to be able to round forward. So I just keep that cue going throughout the whole motion.
Do you kind of see like a breakdown when that starts to happen? Because I often see like with clients, they're doing really well, and then all of a sudden, like as it's almost like they're forcing themselves up over the bar and they let it go.
Well, it's like we talked about earlier. If somebody's cranking out pull-ups, they're staying in that middle 75%. You're also weaker at the top. So that the second place to work is kind of some active holds in the top where you're holding right position. Because I think when people do those compensations that you're talking about, it's because they lack some of the upper body strength to keep that proper shoulder blade back and down position. Okay.
So active holds at the top are always good. And I always tell people, like, film yourself from different angles too, because you're not always going to see what's happening if you're not filming it and watching it, if you're not like actually working with a coach. We're talking to people that might not always have a coach with them. Do you recommend from the active hang to also work on negatives? Do you feel that those are effective?
Absolutely. So between the two hangs, I also really like eccentrics. If you're going to do eccentrics, that's work the areas that are toughest. Any eccentric contraction, your body's able to produce more force. So it always is easier for you to perform an exercise with a given weight eccentrically than it is to push up concentrically. So it's easier to lower yourself under control than it is to raise yourself up. But we want to really strengthen the top of the pull-up and the bottom of the pull-up while not ignoring the middle. So I would have somebody jump up over the bar, hold that for a couple seconds, usually about 3 seconds, lower down for 3 seconds, and then pause in the bottom in that active hang for 3 seconds. That way you're hitting a little bit of everything.
Cool. All right. So let's go back and revisit this hollow hold thing. Because this is like, it's actually very, very difficult to do when you're doing a pull-up. It is. So, a lot of times that's where we see not necessarily the cheating, but, we see the defaults happen most where you either go into an extended or arch back position, and you're like crunched and you're tucking your knees up, or, so do you work on the hollow position from the floor and eventually transfer it to the pull-up, or do you like to work from the bar initiating it?
I like to to hold the full hollow body position where our spine is a little flexed, both of our legs are extended and both arms are overextended, is very tough. And you don't need that much strength to hold a hollow position on a pull-up bar. So I like to start on the floor. I think somebody's laying down, they're going to curl up their head a little bit with their arms across their chest, and then their hips are flexed to 90 degrees, not more than 90 degrees, because you'll see sometimes people just pull their hips in even more to compensate for being really weak, and teach them the hollow position. And I basically say, if you can get in that position and then rock back and forth a little bit, then you are actually hollow, you're actually rounded. And you'll see a lot of people that are flat lumbar spine and then rounded upper back. And when they try to rock, they're hitting that like flat spot in their lumbar spine. So I use that position alone to teach them what the hollow body position is. And typically, if they can hold that position, then they can get up into the pull-up bar and get into that position. So they're kind of simultaneous, but you don't have to master the floor hollow body position to then be able to get up on a pull-up rig and hold that.
Okay. And do you find people that are sort of stuck in anterior pelvic tilts to have difficulty with this? Because I know for myself, that's something I struggled with for a long time.
Oh, it's very tough. I mean, I'm one of those that's right there with you. The max hollow body position for me is still a very difficult position to get into. Yeah. And I got a little spinal abnormality that's not painful or anything, but it makes it very tough for me to get past neutral in my lower back. And so getting into that position is very, very tough. But I can get into it on a pull-up bar. So that's how I do my pull-ups.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sort of the same as well. I've made leaps and bounds over the years, but it's definitely nowhere near like where it should be. So I guess, one thing that you and I have both stressed early on that we should still stress is it's not about being perfect. It's about, getting into the best position for your body.
Yeah, this is just where we're going to activate the most muscles and get the most bang for your buck, but there's many different ways to do pull-ups. So I come from the CrossFit world where everybody does kipping, so.
Yeah, and I've got some, CrossFitters that are on board with the work that I do as well, but that's not my primary clientele. So, you see a lot of different movement patterns than I do. So let's talk about the core in general, sort of visually, what should, the anterior core look like when we're doing the hollow hold? Because a lot of times, we see it sort of like the bread loaf where it extends out and the rectus abdominis is sort of taking over, but that's not necessarily what we want to happen, right?
I don't cue specific muscles. I just try to tell somebody if they can't feel the rocking, if they're not getting me when I'm trying to rock them from that initial position, I just say take the distance between your pelvic bone and your rib cage and bring them as close together as you can. And a lot of times I'll have people actually touch those two bones so that they can actually feel when they're moving those two positions. Otherwise, I very, very rarely for almost any exercise ever cue specific muscles.
Okay, cool. All right, so we get into that hollow position, and you like to say, sort of the banana position. So you prefer knees extended versus bent knees. Is that always the case?
Knees extended are going to be harder, but I usually start with the bent knee and arms not above the head. And then typically, and this isn't always the case, typically once we're in that position, then we can go arms overhead, which will increase kind of the lever arm a little bit there. And then I'll extend one leg and see if they can maintain that and then extend both legs. Okay. And you'll see a lot of times I want them to hold that initial position with hips flexed and arms not overhead because they're going to get in that maximum hollow position. And then I really, really watch as they either move their arms or their legs out to make sure they don't lose any of that. Because you'll see somebody lose just a little bit, and then you know that it's a hair above where they're at, or that they just need to become a little bit more aware of positioning there. But
Awesome.
people really, really, really quickly, even though one version of it seems easy to them, as soon as you take one tiny step up, they lose positioning. And I'd rather them have to hold the prior stage for a much longer period of time
Yeah.
than to lose any of that positioning.
So yeah, and that's why I'm like such a huge fan of the dead bug, because there's so many different variations and so many regressions and progressions that really teaches you like that awareness of, you know, what's
Mhm.
going on, the lumbopelvic movement, and, you know, what happens when you start extending limbs, what's going on in that, you know, that area when you start moving your limbs individually and then together. Um,
It, it provides a little bit more feedback too,
mhm,
because
absolutely.
typically the entire back is completely flat on the ground, or maybe you got a little bit of lumbar off the ground, but you can put a little towel roll or something underneath for dead bugs. And you immediately know when you lose positioning on that.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah,
lot harder to feel loss of positioning with hollow body. And like you mentioned earlier, pulling a camera out for that may be a great time, or having somebody else watch you when you do it, because it's so easy to lose positioning with hollow body and not realize it.
absolutely. Awesome. So let's talk about, because you always have different videos going on that break down the components of a good pull-up. And,
Mhm.
you know, we're not going to walk up to the bar and get into this hollow position and then understand, you know, the scapular depression and suddenly like start pulling up. So what are some of your favorite like regression or precursor exercises to help people build that initial strength? That you've got a lot of different ones that you use.
So after active hangs and eccentrics, I love toe assisted pull-ups. A lot of times we see people use bands like I have over my head here to do pull-ups,
Mhm.
which are great to allow you to start doing it. But the big problem with pull-ups or banded pull-ups is that in that bottom position, it gives you a ton of assistance,
Mhm.
and the top it doesn't. So you can do a lot of reps with it. And maybe if you're doing a workout where your goal is to get a high volume in, that might be a good option. But I think if you're working strength and you're trying to get your first one or your first two or three, then something like toe assisted pull-ups is going to be better, because it's going to allow you to also strengthen that bottom position. So I'll have an athlete put a box underneath the pull-up bar so that their chin is right above the pull-up bar. And then they're going to hold on, lower themselves down while they go into like a sissy squat. So basically they push their knees forward and they go onto their toes.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, I've got videos of this that you can put up for people to
Yeah.
watch if they're not auditory learners.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll share the videos in the
and
post.
as they go into that sissy squat with the knee going forward, it actually kind of naturally puts them a little bit into a hollow body position. So it reinforces that. And then they can use their legs to provide only as much assistance as they need. So, you know, in the bottom position, they may need to kick more, kick less. It allows them to really customize it based on where in the movement they are weak and strong.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you're not in like a super awesome gym like Zach has, you can always do this on, if you're in a commercial gym, you can do this on the Smith machine too, right? Just from the floor.
Yeah, you can go from the floor. Another great one with the Smith machines is rack chins. I really like that. They're a little bit easier than pull-ups a lot of times, but put your feet up on a bench. Set the Smith machine so the bar is at kind of chin level as you're standing. Then put your feet out in front of you on a bench and lower yourself down. You'll kind of be in a pike position in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So again, your legs can provide a little bit of assistance there, and you can do a chin up, and you can also put a dumbbell or barbell across your lap for a little bit more resistance. Um, I like getting kind of in a hollow body position on the ground, attaching some bands to a rig above your head, and you can work really maintaining that hollow position as you do kind of supine hollow body band pull downs. That's
Okay.
another good one to use. And certainly if you have a Gravitron machine, those are good as well. They're only in some commercial gyms, but they basically you set a certain amount of assistance on the machine and it'll provide that much weight. So like if you weigh 130 pounds, you could put 20 pounds on there and it's like you're a 120-pound person doing pull-ups. Just
Okay.
gets rid of a little bit of body weight.
Cool. I was thinking of the fair, the Gravitron, when you go to the fair as a kid. I'm like, that doesn't sound fun. Awesome. So these are all really, really great tips. What are some assistance or early on exercises that women can do to sort of help build up to a pull-up. So say we're not quite ready to be under the bar. We're not quite ready to do some of these assisted exercises from the very beginning. Say I'm walking into the gym for the first time. I have pull-up on my goal, but I'm kind of new to strength training. So where would I start?
If you want to be new to strength training, and what if my wife is any indication of what women like, then machines. I would go find a lat pull down machine, but find one. A lot of times, if you look at people doing lat pull downs, they never actually get to full shoulder range of motion. If you can find a way to get it so that your shoulder is really overhead in the bottom position, I think that's really important. I think a lot of people lose a little bit of strength because they don't do lat pull downs through full shoulder range of motion.
Okay.
Machine rows, dumbbell rows, barbell rows, anything basically where you're pulling yourself to a bar or pulling an implement or weight towards your chest so that you're pulling backwards is fair game to start to develop pull-up strength without that kind of intimidation factor of pull-ups and doing these weird pull-up exercises that we're talking about when you're brand new to the gym.
Yeah. And you want to stick with the same mechanics as well too. I have a lot of women come to me and they're like, what was that one arm exercise that we did? I was like, no. We're not using the arms. So you want to stick with the same mechanics as well, doing all these other.
Yeah. And one good cue that you kind of bring up there when you say that arm exercise is I like to tell people to pull. I like to say, and I'm from the country, so this is why. Imagine somebody has a fishing line hooked onto the backside of your elbow and they're pulling your elbow towards your body.
Yeah.
I think that tends to get people using their lats and back muscles more than arms.
Yeah, I love the elbow cue because then they're thinking more about the movement of the elbow than whether or not, they're feeling their bicep flex or any of those. I mean, yeah, you are essentially using your arm secondary, but you don't want that to be your focus.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the only thing you feel.
So do you feel, sort of the mind muscle connection really comes into play here, teaching people to focus on specific areas, like to think about it when they're doing these movements?
Well, there's some interesting research around that. When you're learning a motor pattern, some research shows that you don't want to use an internal focus. So you're a little bit better at learning a motor skill if you're not thinking about using muscles. If you're using cues like shoulder blades towards your pocket is better than saying pull your shoulder blades down, because it gives you something outside of your body to think of. But there are a lot of people, and I believe this as well, that if we're talking bodybuilding, body shaping, building up specific muscles, then yes, there are definitely times where you want to be actively thinking about, during a hip thrust, finish your hip thrust with a strong glute contraction. So it kind of depends on how you're looking at this. I'd say if you're thinking from a learning the motor pattern of a pull-up, unless you're somebody that's only feeling it in the biceps, let's try to just think about performing it with proper form and not think about squeezing your lats or relaxing your biceps or whatever. Think the pattern, not the muscles. Yeah.
And I mean, that's always very relevant. And often we do use those external cues, but people are like, well, what should I be feeling? Like what muscles should I feel work? So I think they start thinking about that once they understand, like, oh, I'm moving my elbows behind the body, So awesome. And do you have any recommendations for like how often we should perform those overhead movements? Because a lot of people, like they set that goal of, I'm going to do pull-ups every single day until I get my first pull-up. Do you feel that's productive, counterproductive?
I don't have a problem with people performing it daily, but you got to keep volume low if you're doing that. Different exercises have different impacts on the body and our ability to recover. So you're probably not going to deadlift and squat every single day maximally heavy, but things like pull-ups, which are a body weight only movement done at a relatively low volume, I believe that you can do on about a daily basis. The article that I wrote for CrossFit Journal on developing pull-up strength with a CrossFit gymnast, Pamela Gagnon, who's an amazing coach that you should actually reach out to. she actually wrote an amazing program for helping people develop her first pull-up, and she has them working every single day. So they're doing 3 of the drills we talked about. They're doing active hangs and eccentrics, and they alternate days between active hangs and eccentrics. And then every day she has them do the toe-assisted pull-ups that we talked about as well.
Okay.
But you're doing very, very low volume on that. So it's just continually working that motor pattern and figuring it out and building strength in those right motions. So she actually starts like day one. Her program is day one is 5 sets of 1 toe assist pull-ups,
Okay.
and then a few active hangs.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of week 1, after 6 days of training, you're at 5 sets of 2 toe assist pull-ups. By the end of week 2, you're at 5 sets of 3, and so on for 4 weeks. And she says that, over 90% of the time, women that follow this program get their first pull-up within a month of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's exceptionally important, because often we set these goals and we're so determined, that we want to reach this goal that we sort of overexert or overdo, and like you said, the shoulders are extremely complicated and
Mm-hmm.
very, very prone to injury, simply because like, think about how many different ways you can move your arm, right? That's pretty fantastic. And there's a lot of parts in there making that possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want to be smart about reaching this goal, and you're going to reach it faster when you lower the volume and
Don't make yourself sore, because then the next day you're not going to be able to do anything.
Yeah. And I learned that, once I started doing pole fitness quite frequently, it's like basically doing pull-ups for like an hour.
Yeah.
So upper body intensive. And then I learned I had to back off a lot with my overhead stuff in the gym. Otherwise my shoulders and my elbows were just wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of hard for me to like give up doing pull-ups in my workouts, but I do them so much in pole fitness that there had to be a trade-off.
Yeah.
So the shoulders are definitely something that we need to focus on protecting. Otherwise you're not going to be able to use them.
Yes.
So. Well, I really appreciate this. It was such good information, and I'm sure it's going to generate a ton of questions. So hopefully we can have you back on, or, we can always talk about other things, because the stuff you put out about hips is like phenomenal as well. I share a ton of that. So is there any other things that you want to add that we didn't talk about, just to sort of help women feel more comfortable in trying that first pull-up? Because I think there's sort of that initial scare too, like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do this.
It's definitely hard. Don't worry about it as far as getting one done right now. It can take a little while. It can take a lot of factors from, slight fluctuations in your weight can make pull-ups drastically different too. So for women, certain times in the month could be impossible to do a pull-up. Other times can be easy to crank out a couple. Yeah. So, your weight goes up 3 pounds, and oh my gosh.
I know.
I go from doing 14 pull-ups to 9 pull-ups.
I know. Whenever I'm doing a powerlifting meet, I'm like, I'm done. Like, I'm not even going to try to do pull-ups because I gained 10 pounds.
It's certainly a very difficult skill to master, and I don't think anybody should get down on themselves if they never get it. Mm-hmm. That is not an indicator of your fitness or how well you are. It takes work, and it's definitely something to be celebrated no matter how you do it. Yeah. If you have to use a little leg drive to get your first one, if it's not the prettiest, if you didn't follow all the things we talked about earlier, who cares? You got to pull up. Great job. Yeah. And still work on it. Even if if it's not ever going to happen, like, so what? Like, still work on it. Yeah. The strength benefits you'll get from something like just working on the active hangs are going to be amazing for your upper body strength. And I think strengthening the muscles that you strengthen with like just the active hangs are great for women dealing with tons of upper trap tension, neck pain, cervicogenic headaches. I work all the time at getting my wife to do more active hangs because she deals with nonstop headaches due to her anatomy and how she's set up and not having strong enough upper back. So it's great no matter what. Yeah. She can't do pull-ups, but I've got her doing active hangs nonstop. Yeah. So it transfers in many different ways. Awesome, Zach. Well, this has been so enlightening. And, I love how you translate information so that, everybody can understand and implement all these things right away.
So what are the best places to find you online?
The main hub is thebarbellphysio.com, and then Facebook or Instagram at the Barbell Physio is the best way to see the drills and stuff that I put out that we talked about.
Awesome. And I will post all the stuff with the interview along with, I'm going to dig in and find some of your best videos as well to share. So I appreciate having you, and it's always a pleasure. Take
Thank you
care.
so much, Kelly.
Bye.